Here we are, March. I thought I was going to make it. Colin, Jesse, I thought I'd make it through the entirety of spring, but they're going to force me to do it tonight. They are going to paper pop very, very early, force me to talk about culture issues. Because as we all know, when someone gets in trouble, that means you got a culture problem. False, but we will talk about it. We're jam-packed, high atop a crowded downtown Nashville, Tennessee. You can hear the dribbles on the court. That's how close we are. We're in the shadow of Bridgestone Arena. But we're talking college football tonight. Culture issues at Georgia. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I picking up what the AJC is putting down? I wasn't going to touch on this. I was going to choose to let bygones be bygones, but I follow you, and you were asking me to discuss it, so discuss we will tonight. We got major portal questions. I thought Chris Hummer did a really, really good feature, which seems like it should have taken about 17 years to put together, and that is like, what was it, Jesse? The top 150 transfer portal stories to follow. Again, the Lord's work being done out in Waxahachie, Texas by one Chris Hummer. I'm going to talk about 4 of them tonight, and we're going to leave the other 146 for another day. Spring intel. What if I told you? I don't care if you're a Washington State fan or an FAU fan. Maybe not FAU, definitely Washington State. That there's stuff going on in Columbus, Ohio. There's stuff going on in Austin, Texas, right as we speak, right here and now, that's going to impact you. In some weird, twisted way, it's going to impact you. And certainly Ohio State and Texas fans care about that. I'm going to talk about that. I am going to go down the old trusty spring evergreen content route also of answering a question tonight about my favorite college football traditions. And buddy, we had a time whittling that down as the afternoon progressed. They're watching us in McDonough, Georgia. They're watching us in Phoenix, Arizona. Hickory, North Carolina is tuned in, as is Dayton, Ohio. And in the interest of looking out for others in the company, I would encourage you in some of your free time, doesn't matter when, this is also an evergreen piece of content, go check out the Football Recruiting Podcast. I said that fast, so I'll say it again. Go check out the Football Recruiting Podcast. It's normally Cooper Pategna and Andrew Ivins. Ivins had the good sense to go get married in spring, late winter as it were, so I co-hosted with Cooper Pategna, and I thought we were going to talk about the difference between a 3-star and a 4-star, and instead it was a This Is Your Life JP edition. And as you all know, I'm not normally one to turn the light around and shine it on myself. I've got an entire crew that will attest to that, Bradley especially, but I found it very, very fruitful, and in all seriousness, I always encourage people to hear my story, not because I love telling it over and over again, but because I know there are like millions of you out there, especially in your early 20s, who were in the exact situation I was at that exact point in time. And I really think even if you don't care about getting in media, just if you want to succeed in life, listen to that. And there's also some really, really good anecdotes in the world of college football and otherwise. All righty, let's dive into this tonight. I appreciate you guys being tuned in. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you don't do it early, I'm going to beg you later. So just get it out of the way. Just do it now. We had a question come in earlier today, and I was looking to dodge this. I had spoken my piece on this entire Jalen Carter, Georgia situation. Is he going to fall in the draft? Should we even be talking about it in that context when 2 lives were lost? And you know the backstory there. But I can't escape it because Alan sent a question in today that really echoes what several of you have sent to me over the past week or so. So I'm going to do it right here on this Thursday evening. Alan, if you're listening on podcast, you can't see the question on the screen. Alan asked me, why are you ignoring Kirby's culture issues at Georgia when even the AJC has called him out? Well, I'll tell you, Alan, I didn't really think much of the AJC piece. So that's why I didn't talk about the AJC piece, and don't bother going to look. It's behind a paywall. So we're not going to really read a lot from the AJC piece, but here's the summary. Georgia's got culture issues. That was the summary of the AJC piece, and then they talked about player arrests and the street racing issue that they have up there, neither of which I'm dismissing, neither of which I'm overlooking. But there's a reason I try to stay away from this, and it's the same reason I stay away from questioning play calling. I don't know enough about it, and here's the difference between me and the person who penned that article. I'm willing to admit it, and that person is not. Because there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of traffic to be had this time of year in calling out someone's culture. The play calling thing is pretty straightforward. Most people just couldn't beat their way out of a wet paper bag when it comes to diagramming a football play. Therefore, that's why I don't think they're qualified to question play calling. Not to mention you haven't even begun to know as much as those coaching staffs have forgotten about the intricacies of said venture as well as the personnel within the organization. But forget about play calling because we're talking about culture here and someone questioning your culture. What's culture? How do you know when you have a culture problem? And how do you know when someone else has a culture problem? Here's why I dismiss this stuff a lot of times. It could be true that someone has a culture issue. It's just that I don't really value the opinion of people who have never built anything when it comes to diagnosing someone else's cultural issues. And to be clear, when we're talking about building a major college football program and then maintaining it at an extremely high level, which Kirby Smart and Georgia are at right now. You're talking about obviously building a very high-profile organization. You're talking about leading people, and not just leading people, but getting them to buy into something that you have injected into an organization bigger than yourself in terms of philosophy, in terms of values, in terms of principle, and understanding therein how complex that organization is to run. That's culture. You know, that's how you install one. That's how you instill one. And most people have never done that. Most people have never run an organization. The few are called to do that because there are very few that are qualified to do it. So they got one at Georgia. Everyone's got one. Some people's cultures are great. Many more of them suck, but everyone's got a culture. So at Georgia, not only have I thought they don't have a culture issue, I think they got one of the strongest cultures in college football. And you see, long before any of these incidents that happened after this past season happened, long before anyone wrote an article about questionable culture issues at Georgia, people talked about this behind the scenes. It's not a mystery that kids occasionally get in trouble at Georgia, at Bama, at Florida, at Minnesota, and everywhere in between. How do you know when it bleeds over from some people doing some stupid stuff to you having a full-blown culture issue? Well, the answer is unless you get a peek behind the curtain, you probably don't know. Now, at some point, if you're getting an arrest every other day, yes, at that point, a blind monkey can assignate that we probably got a culture issue over here, but that's not normally the way it works. Georgia's had some kids do some stupid stuff lately. That much we can all agree on. What I would suggest to you is there is a sizable difference between kids doing some stupid stuff and you having a full-blown culture issue. Meemaw used to always tell me, you know, if you look at culture, good cultures can have bad days. Bad cultures rarely have good weeks. They even more rarely have good months. They've had a lot of good weeks, a lot of good months, a lot of good years now at Georgia. They've had some bad days, though. And I'm not trying to gloss over, and if you've watched this program or listened to the pod, you know I've taken very seriously the consequences of some of the stupid things that some of the players in the Georgia program have done. That's how consequences work. Sometimes you don't have to suffer them when you do something stupid, and 100% of the people watching this show right now can relate to that, by the way. Sometimes you do. And I wouldn't say 100% of you have had to live that out, but some of you have. Some of you have done some dumb things in the past and had to suffer maximum consequence for it. There is a person or was a person and are several people now that are either dealing with direct or indirect consequences in the Georgia program because of something like that happening. Very serious thing. And I can assure you there have been some sleepless nights from folks inside that program up there because of that. But what I don't think is they've got to tear the thing down to the studs and rebuild from scratch because some kids doing some stupid things indicate that we've got internal rot here. Just the culture's no good. The culture's great at Georgia. You just got, like any other program out there, some due diligence to do and some spots to clean up. But I go back to the question, Colin, in fact, I know we're rolling some beautiful B-roll right now. Could you do me a favor? Could you take the question and could you throw it back up on the screen for me for just a second? Because I want to make sure I read this right. So the question from Alan was, why are you ignoring Kirby's culture issues at Georgia? Okay, so I read it right. And the AJC's called him out. So, you know, once the AJC does something, we all have to do something. And that's the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for anyone under 35, by the way. Have you taken time, Alan, to measure Georgia against all 134 other FBS programs out there? How do they measure up? If we're just following publicly recorded and reported stories, how do they measure up? Well, I mean, what is the Georgia to Nevada ratio, for example? I don't think you've done that, if you're honest with yourself. No one's out there really tracking that. It's just called another kind of consequence. It's a consequence of success. They don't really do these kind of stories on you when you're 6-6 because no one cares. They care when you're winning. And they especially care when they understand there's real life tragedy involved here. And again, I've been very careful to walk a tightrope in talking about this because I have maintained and still maintain it feels really gross talking about something as inconsequential as a newspaper article about possible culture issues within a program when the entire backdrop is loss of life. We don't really have to deal with that much on this show. Normally we're talking about which guy's going to start at right guard for Georgia. We're not talking about whether we should diagnose Georgia as having a culture issue in a situation that stems from people losing their life. But that's where we are right now. That's why it's delicate. But I go back to the question, compared to who? Well, what's the barometer out there? If we got 100% of teams in the hopper route here, how much worse is Georgia than 80% of them, 70% of them, 90% of them? I don't really think that's been done, nor will it be done. That would take a little bit of legwork, and it would also take something you can't acquire, nor can I, and that is intimate familiarity with the inside of a college football program. You would find very quickly they don't put robots on the field. They put 18 to 22-year-old people on the field. You and I were there at one point. They're there right now. Little bit more bright, white, hot spotlight on them than there probably was on you or I when we were that age. And sometimes they do stupid things, and sometimes really bad results come from doing stupid things. Georgia is a great program with, I think, a very solid culture that's had bad days. It's not a bad culture because no bad cultures have great weeks, great months, great years, and they've strung a lot of those together lately. I will also tell you this in texting around with some folks at both the NFL and college football level today. I can't find one that's willing to echo that sentiment. Alan, that you suggested, that the AJC suggested, you don't find people inside football, anonymous or on the record, that say, yeah, Georgia's culture sucks. Now, they're winning a lot, and they're pumping kids into the NFL, but their culture sucks. You'll also find, on a related note, no one really consistently wins and pumps kids into the NFL with terrible culture. They may do it short term, just like a firework can burn for a little while. They don't sustain it. Funny thing about culture, you're competing against too many other programs that have good ones. If yours sucks, you're not staying on top for very long. I don't think they have a culture issue at Georgia. Now, I am perfectly willing to change that vantage point, change that opinion, if overwhelming evidence continues to present itself. I have a sneaking suspicion it won't. Let's ask some questions on a much more happy, cheerful, and unrelated note. Let's take a look at what Chris Hummer did today. Chris Hummer, an angel amongst us here at 24/7 Sports, did a really, really good piece that I think even up until this moment is still on 247sports.com front page. And he was asking a lot of portal questions. And I know what you guys do. Even the most diehard amongst us, you may take some time for Christmas. I can't blame you for that. You may go to a New Year's Eve party. You may have things that you've put off during the college football season that you get to in January and February, and then maybe around spring practice, you come back to the table for a little while, and I would first like to say, welcome back. Secondly, I would like to say you missed a lot. So strap in, and we have to talk about 4 of them tonight. I would encourage you to go check out Hummer's piece, though, because there is a lot of movement that's happened. For example, are you aware LSU pretty much retooled their entire secondary? Denver Harris, you remember him? We were talking about him this time last year and what impact he was going to have for Texas A&M. None, because he's not there anymore. And so he is at LSU now. Here's what I want you to remember about Denver Harris. He is among many notable portal additions for the Tigers in the secondary. Denver Harris did not work out at Texas A&M. It's not because of lack of talent. I cannot guarantee you it's going to work at LSU, but if it doesn't work at LSU, it won't be because of lack of talent. It will be because of obviously things that start from the neck and work their way up from there. Everyone wanted him. Out of high school, everyone wanted him, and they'd still take him now. Apples to apples, everyone would still take him now. They got him. They got Zy Harris from southeastern Louisiana, 6'3", 185 pounds. Hummer called him one of the best FCS additions you don't know about. And I'm going to hold him to that, unless he's right, in which case we will, out of context, clip this show 6 months from now and say, we called it. We called Zy Harris. He's down there. Deuce Chestnut is down there. Jesse had to walk me through the spelling on the first name. Just to be clear, earlier today, he's from Syracuse, a multi-year starter up there at corner. And also J.K. Johnson, who was a top 50 kid in the 2021 recruiting cycle, was at Ohio State, got some minutes last year. He's transferred to LSU as well. So anyway, we're not going to exit spring. I can guarantee you this. We will not talk to the LSU defensive coaching staff coming out of spring and them tell me anything about this being a finished product and them tell me anything on or off the record about how this is about to be a top 5 unit. But what they could tell me is I think we've got high upside, high ceiling. And when you got a lot of transfer infusion, that's what you're hoping to be able to say coming out of spring. At North Carolina, what do we need there? We got Drake May. We got a really good quarterback. We got a guy we think can end up in New York City, end up in the first round of the draft this next cycle. But what we don't have is, well, much of a defense up there. And also what we need is some receivers, because he lost Josh Downs and Antoine Green. Those were his 1-2. Last year, there is a kid from Kent State, because the entire team transferred out of Kent. There's a kid named Devontae Walker that I need you to be familiar with so that you're not having to learn about him on the fly come fall. He was, well, here's what they're having to replace. So 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, that's what they're having to replace. Devontae Walker, number 3 overall receiver out of the portal, 6'3", very, very fast, doesn't have to trade a lot of the speed to get the size, going to be a really, really good vertical threat. Probably, I would guess, ends up being their number 1 downhill threat. Jesse, just because I have a sadistic fascination with this, can we look at the losses that Kent State had? This is not a Kent segment, but I want you to imagine this. Imagine you are the most diehard of diehard Kent State fans, and you actually buy season tickets, and God bless every one of you who do this, and you tune in for the Tuesday night Maction games, and all of a sudden you wake up and you've lost your quarterback, your best running back, 3 receivers, both starting offensive tackles, and a starting corner. Oh, and the coach is gone too. Go Flashes. So God bless Kent, because they will absolutely need that and then some this fall. I'm not even really done talking about the Kent additions. I'm just done talking about the additions at North Carolina. You remember A.D. Mitchell at Georgia? He's not at Georgia anymore. He's at Texas. And I think that Texas may not so sneakily have one of the best receiver units in college football this year. I heard what you said. There is not a single, well, there's actually one audience member in the studio tonight, but I know most of you are not in here, but I just heard what you said. You said, it doesn't matter. Texas will underachieve. It doesn't matter. Quinn Ewers won't get the job done. I don't have that high level of forward-thinking perception as a lot of you to call the future so seamlessly like that. I just want to let you know that Xavier Worthy, it turns out, played a majority of last season with a broken hand. Sark has filled us in on that now. But A.D. Mitchell is a portal addition. A.D. Mitchell has been one of the biggest play receivers for Georgia the past 2 years. You may remember him from such games as the national championship against Alabama, the semifinal against Ohio State, and really everyone just went off and had career days against TCU. But you pair him, and I want you to think about everyone at their top-end potential, because I cannot assume injury is ever going to happen. I got him. I got Isaiah Nair, who I thought was going to be an impact player last year out of the portal from Wyoming, of all places, and then he got hurt. And then if I get a healthy Xavier Worthy to go along with those two, and Jordan Whittington's back for his 37th year on campus, if I get what even a remote fraction of what I could get out of that group, and also, by the way, Jonte Cook's on campus too, just a top 30 player in the country out of the 24/7 Sports Composite, 5-star receiver, just casually or not so casually chilling over there. Really, really good receiver room. More about Texas later in the show. And USC, not so surprisingly, dipped heavily into the transfer portal. Number 5 portal class, Jesse, I think. Yeah, right now, number 5 portal class. Anthony Lucas is one to look at. He was part of that big defensive line haul for Texas A&M. Didn't work out. He's out. Jack Sullivan had 25 edge pressures for Purdue last year. He is in Southern Cal now. Marshawn Lloyd is one of my favorite players in the country, a running back that was formerly at SC on the East Coast. Now he's at SC on the West Coast, South Carolina to USC. Dorian Singer, Arizona's wide receiver, had over 1,100 yards receiving last year. And Mason Cobb, really good linebacker, out of Oklahoma State. Who didn't leave Oklahoma State? I don't know. I come on the show and I claim to be here to bring you answers. And then someone asks me, what's going on with Oklahoma State? And I'm the shruggy emoji. I don't even know. It was a really good week here in Nashville. Not that it's over by any stretch. And this isn't even about the ongoing high-stakes Play for Keeps ping pong tournament that's going on in the office. No, I'll talk about that probably later. I did win my first round matchup today in short order. But we had the Academy reps in town. Yes, they actually made their way from Texas. They're working the SEC tournament, and so we are 2 blocks away from the arena. And so they made their way over, and I got to tell you, it was nice. We went to get lunch with them yesterday. We went to the Palm. Jesse did not get to come. Colin did not get to come. Maybe next year, maybe next trip. It also wasn't on my dime, so I mean, really, I can't call that shot. But we took them to eat, and then they came over to the studio today, and out of all of the back and forth we've had with our Academy brethren, it's the first time they've ever been in the building. So it was a really high-traffic day in the studio today. But Academy Sports and Outdoors, longtime partner, obviously, of the show. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. So let's all breathe a sigh of relief together. And then also, I want to tell you, we had like 37 new ideas that we threw around with them that you'll eventually see make their way onto the show. There's a picture of us down on the street. I mean, look, our building is not that far away from Bridgestone relative to where this picture is taken from. So, yeah, it's a busy, busy day on the streets. If you're listening on podcast, just imagine me dressed like a banker, involuntarily in a polo, untucked, as it were, and a couple of the Academy reps. Really good to have those guys. I've spoken to them on the phone many times, just never been able to see him in person. Actually, I've seen Alex, who's on the left there. I've seen him in person out in College Station. Big Aggies. Not so surprisingly, big Aggies. But Academy Sports and Outdoors, a friend, a lifetime partner of the show, and also, it's not just a buddy. You know, if I had a friend, I probably wouldn't tell you a lot about him. I've got a friend in Academy that you need to know about because they are, number one, your one-stop shop for all things outdoor sporting goods. And number two, they are the reason that you don't have to pay a dime to watch this show. Now, someone came in the comment section the other day, as Meemaw would call them, a rabble-rouser, came in the comment the other day and said, hold on a second. How in the world do you have ads running on your YouTube videos, but still tell us that Academy is needed to make the show free? And here's the thing about that. This is a really big building we work in. This mic alone costs $500, and everyone around here makes a salary. And all these cameras cost money. This production equipment costs money, a lot of it. You know how expensive these lights are? What I'm trying to tell you is it may stun you to know that YouTube ads don't pay for all this. Several entities have to. And so when an Academy Sports and Outdoors walks in the door and says, hello, we're here to help, you embrace them as I am right now. You just wrap your arms around them. And then when they say, oh, by the way, check out our selection, then it's a perfect match. That's why we're in business with Academy. And that's why I highly encourage you, as winter turns to spring rapidly in some portions of the country, get in there. It occurred to me the other day, not a lot of you, well, not all of you have been inside one of those stores. Whatever you think it's like, it's 10 times better. And if you can't get in there in person, it's okay, because academy.com is your hookup. So really great to have those guys stop by yesterday and today. There are some things happening in spring football that, yes, they impact the programs I'm going to talk about, but I am going to do my level best tonight to convince you they impact pretty much everyone. So, Colin, that's not your endpoint. Here's your endpoint. There's a quarterback battle, not a controversy. There's a battle going on at Ohio State. What if I told you you could be a Kansas State fan, a West Virginia fan? This stuff is going to impact you somehow. We call these keystone position battles, and that's just a term I got from the movie Lake Placid, which is about a massive crocodile. It's just loose in a lake. Betty White's in that movie, Bill Pullman, late 90s, Bridget Fonda. So I heard them mention how either alligators or crocodiles, forgive me for not knowing the difference, are keystone species, meaning what they do in the wild affects the entire ecosystem. Well, I stole that, I just jacked it from the movie, and I said, let's plop it into college football. What could we mean by that? Well, here's what I mean by it. Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are about to fight over the next several months for the starting quarterback job at Ohio State. Big deal. Happens all the time, right? Yes, it does. Don't be so sassy, because I'm also trying to sell you on the fact that this outcome and how whomstever wins that starting job, this outcome is going to impact the entire Big Ten, Keystone, follow me, and also the entire country, because what happens at major programs affects the entire country. Do you know what happens if Ryan Day's not the coach at Ohio State anymore? Now pump the brakes. It's not a hot seat segment. I'm just saying, I think you very quickly, when Nick Saban leaves Alabama in 2047, that will impact the entirety of college football. When things don't work out at Texas, that impacts the entirety of college football. So right now they're through, I think, 1 or 2 days of practice up there. So there's not going to be a lot of intel. Like, no one's made a move. There aren't whispers and rumors that someone's taken control of the job. And even if there were, that coaching staff wouldn't let that get out. But Ryan Day spoke to the media. I think this is from yesterday, and I just wanted to read you something that he said. And I'll show you on the screen. This is the head coach of the Ohio State University. I feel like we'll have a great supporting cast. The quarterback doesn't need to be superhuman. They just need to make routine plays routinely. You would call this coach speak in some circles. I don't. That's via Cameron Robinson from The Athletic, by the way. I don't call that coach speak at all. Did you hear what he just said? In other words, he said, you don't need to be an alien. All the power in the world to Anthony Richardson right now. You don't need to be able to do what he's doing. You need to do the routine things routinely. He just telegraphed to you, if you're an Ohio State fan or otherwise, what to watch for. And what he's basically saying is, we got star players all over the place. We don't need you to shoulder the entire load. I don't need a Cam Newton here. It'd be great if we had one. I don't need one. I need someone to simply do their job. And what that means to you, if you live in Akron, Ohio, or Dublin, Ohio, and you're just following Ohio State spring practices, it doesn't really matter how many wow plays you read on Bucknuts these guys have had on a day-in, day-out basis. Doesn't matter how many highlight plays there are. It matters how much consistency there is. It matters how many consistently good decision days they're stringing together. That's what they're looking for. That's all they've needed. That's all they'll ever need, indefinitely, as long as they recruit the way they do. Consistency. It's the most boring thing in the world to talk about. No one types college football consistently into their search engine. They type in college football highlight, college football mixtape. I know what you search. I get a report every week on it. But consistency is what they need in Columbus. And here's the deal about the old Keystone quarterback battle phrasing. This impacts everyone. You think this doesn't impact you in State College, Pennsylvania? Now, I think you guys pretty well understand it does, because I focus grouped this with Jesse earlier today, and he got it. I think everyone gets it. But think about how all of a sudden you drop that little pebble in the lake and the ripple starts to go out. If one of these guys ends up being everything they need, Ohio State will win the Big Ten. If neither of these guys ends up being exactly what they need, they won't. That could mean an undefeated season leading to a loss at Michigan. And I think we all understand the fallout from that if it were to happen. This could mean that Ohio State's not even undefeated when they play Michigan because Penn State has already won. This will directly impact the shot that James Franklin, with Drew Aller as his quarterback and a really, really good supporting cast around him, has at winning the East and therefore the Big Ten. It has a direct impact on how Jim Harbaugh and Michigan, I can't believe I'm about to say this, are going to try and three-peat in terms of being Big Ten champions, at least. Remember that Michigan-Ohio State game last year? I think most of you do. I do. I told this story the other day, but I don't think enough of you heard it because it wasn't on our normal show. Sip from the chalice. So we covered the game last year. Last 2 years, actually. But last year, it was in Columbus. That's the one where, Ohio State's favored, been favored all year. They're favored again to win the Big Ten, for the record. And that hasn't mattered the last 2 years. We'll see if it matters this year. But Ohio State goes wire to wire. They're undefeated, and you got to come into our house, and we got to atone for what happened last year in the snow up in Ann Arbor, blah, blah, blah. And then they get roasted in the second half. Doesn't look a whole lot different than it did the year before on the scoreboard. So I go to Ryan Day's postgame press conference, come back out on the field. We're about to do a postgame hit for CBS Sports HQ. It's me and it's Uncle Dennis. Dennis Dodd to you, Uncle Dennis to me. And what had happened was the team had gotten dressed and they just started to leave. This is not the road team. It's not Michigan. They're not getting on a bus and going back home. The players are just going back to their dorm. But not all of them did. I probably haven't told this story, so I normally don't tell this kind of stuff. And I'll keep it pretty vague here. No names. So I come back out in the stadium, and there's no one out there. It's an empty stadium. Pretty surreal, actually, when you experience that after it's been loud, 100+ thousand folks. Slowly, some of the Ohio State players, seniors, who were going through that for the last time and who had failed to beat Michigan, trickled back down the ramp. They went up to the section where the Ohio State band would normally be sitting if the stadium were full, and every one of them just bawling their eyes out. And the camera is facing us. We are facing them, about 20 yards away. And I remember it being one of the most surreal moments because we're talking loud enough for them to hear. They didn't say anything. I mean, they probably had totally tuned us out. But we are talking pretty demonstratively about what Michigan just did to them and the statement that was just made and what happens with Ohio State football now. And they can hear every word of it, and it was just a little awkward. And I think about that every time someone mentions the Ohio State quarterback battle. I think about that every time Jesse pops up those Big Ten championship and college football playoff odds for the Big Ten. I think about it anytime someone questions Ryan Day because it all leads back to that game again this year, as it does every year. And this time they'll have to go up the road to Ann Arbor, Michigan to win it. But that schedule, outside of that, looks like it does pretty much every year. They'll be favored the entire way. They get Penn State at home the third week of October. They get Notre Dame on the road. Whew, I don't know what our tour is going to be called this year, but there is more than a half-decent chance we'll be in South Bend, Indiana, September 23rd. That quarterback battle, needless to say, is one to watch. And I'm not really done because I have another quarterback battle I need to talk to you about. You see, the Keystone quarterback battles, there normally aren't many of them. They're really, let's be honest with ourselves. Think about spring football. How many things are happening in a random faraway campus in spring football that truly sucks you in as a Kansas State fan? Like, you're truly selling me as an Iowa fan that what's happening in Coral Gables, Florida is going to impact me. Well, Colin, here's your endpoint. There is a quarterback battle that's happening in Austin, Texas, that some of you don't even think is a quarterback battle, and I'll get to that in just a second. But be that as it may, there are two very high-profile names on campus, and what's happening here, believe me when I tell you, is going to impact the entirety of the sport. Ripple effects will be felt far and wide. Quinn Ewers is out there, obviously, but you know who else has wandered his way onto campus? A kid by the name of Arch Manning, which you've probably heard very little about, but don't worry, you'll get to know him in due time. Jeff Howe over at Horns 24/7, among the entirety of the Texas beat that's been following this, and Jesse unearthed a really, really good quote that Jeff Howe had from Christian Jones. Now, Christian Jones is old by college standards. He is a sixth-year offensive tackle out there, and this quarterback battle's going on, and it's sucking all the oxygen out of the room, and everyone wants to see Arch Manning. And they want to see, is he the real deal? Does he just have 5 stars next to his name because of his last name? I yawn. That's how tired that argument is. I almost yawn when I say it. But here's a quote that Christian Jones gave to Jeff Howe. Football IQ, a whole lot of football IQ. He's got a good arm on him, and he's a very personable guy. I'm excited to see him and just watch him at practice every single day. Now, the reason this quote stands out is because that is a full-grown adult who is saying that. Christian Jones has been there. He's seen like half a dozen Texas quarterbacks, it feels like. He's been there. those veterans, they normally don't dole out praise freely. So I am not trying to sell you that Arch Manning is going to be the next great Manning after one spring session in shorts and a t-shirt. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to start to build the case a little bit. This was, after all, the number one player in the 2023 signing class. Consider how unique this dynamic is. Quinn Ewers is one of the bigger names in college football recruiting over the last several years. Quinn Ewers, number one quarterback in his own right a couple of cycles ago. He was the number one overall player a couple of cycles ago. Skips his senior year. He just says, I don't need this. NIL is a thing now. I'm going to Ohio State. He goes up there. Doesn't really work out. Then he transfers to Texas. Again, all this is leading all of the college football shows. It led this show. It's leading major networks like SportsCenter, leading their broadcast with, hey, there's a kid named Quinn Ewers that's transferring Ohio State to Texas. Anyway, so that is a very high-profile name. And I'm saying all that to tell you, if you listen to people who cover Texas, who have been at these practices so far, Quinn Ewers is the second most popular, most talked about, and most paid attention to quarterback on his own team. How does that happen? Well, the name Manning helps, and the rating of number one next to his name also helps. But whomst would have seen that coming? Quinn Ewers, kind of taking a back seat. Now, in terms of playing time, I don't think he's going to take a back seat. I, like most of you, think he's going to end up being the starter at Texas, and that is sentiment that stems from just my own opinion, and it's also sentiment from talking to some people close to Texas. But I'm going to stop you short if you tell me there's no competition at the quarterback position out there. Competition is a very misunderstood term. A lot of times when we're looking at a quarterback battle, the ones who are smart enough not to call it a controversy and smart enough to call it a competition, some of them even think that just means who's going to start. I had Jesse look it up. Texas plays food in week 1. They got rice. And so basically competition for a lot of folks boils down to who's going to take the field and start versus rice. Guys, that's not competition. At least that's not the entirety of it. Because Sark could guarantee me privately right now, which he's not done, but he could guarantee me privately, yeah, Quinn's our guy. Unless he breaks his leg, Quinn's our guy in week 1. He's going to start against Rice. He could tell me that. And even then, I would tell you, there's going to be extreme competition at Texas football practices. We talked about culture earlier. Competition is a culture. It doesn't stop just because you get named a starter and you're named a backup. And for Arch Manning, competition is going to be every step of his life, the rest of his college football journey, professional football journey, and beyond. Any high-level competitor. That's why they call it being a competitor. You compete. And if someone tells you you're not starting, all you hear is, that means I'm not starting right now. I eventually will. And be that as it may, I'm going to hold myself to a standard regardless. There's always competition. So competition, just because a guy's not maybe starting week 1 of his true freshman year, is still there. So yes, when that headline came out earlier this week, and Sark told the media, we're going to have a quarterback competition, a lot of people dismissed that, and they said, because Quinn Ewers is going to start. Both of you are probably right. I think both of you are probably right. I know Sark's right. I know they've got competition going on out there, regardless of whether we're all right about Quinn Ewers starting. So the reason that is a keystone quarterback battle, the reason that's going to impact the rest of the sport is because if it doesn't pan out this year and they go 7-5 again, you know how uncomfortable that gets for Steve Sarkisian? Do you know how many people would say, we're not going to have a cupboard this stocked and allow ourselves to underachieve? We've got to figure out a way to get the right head coach in here and keep this talent in here. Because one thing they have not shortchanged Texas on is recruiting. They've recruited very well. They've brought in good portal players. They brought in really good recruiting classes. Line of scrimmage talent has been replenished. That's why I think they're going to make a big jump this year. But if they didn't, if this quarterback battle we're talking about, if that did not yield a multi-game improvement from last year's 7-win season, and it was 5 wins the year before, if it happens at Texas, if there are moves made at Texas, it reverberates throughout the entire sport. The other one that I wanted to look at, actually, is that receiver group. We talked about them earlier in the show, if you're watching the entire show. That receiver group, I can't help but think of those guys. I can't help but think of adding A.D. Mitchell to go along with Whittington, to go along with Xavier Worthy, to go along with Isaiah Nayer. And that true freshman, that 5-star kid, you have to play before we just seamlessly mention you by name here. Last name Cook, though. I think about that group, and what happens if we even get good quarterback play at Texas, much less above good to great quarterback play. Could be a really good team this year. I know it's not popular because anytime someone suggests, someone even whispers, Texas could be good, everyone says, well, people say that every year. Not us. We don't say it every year. Now, I'll tell you who does. The model. The model says it every year. The model thought that Texas could beat the Chiefs last year. But the model was drunk on Texas. That's not on me. That's on the model. Texas could be very good this year. Maybe the model was just 1 year ahead on Texas. I want you to do me a favor as my computer has frozen. So I can't really tell how many of you are watching the show. I just know a lot of you are. Do me a quick favor. Subscribe and like the video. That's it. It's not anything grandiose. Some of you wanted to know from me right here in March. You wanted me to go on the record, and Michael is one of them. So Colin, I just bungled that. So here's your endpoint. Michael hit me up and said, "What 3 teams have the best chance of getting 3 or more wins than last season?" And I just now realized in our show prep why when I added a 4th team to my list, Jesse looked at me sideways. It's because Michael asked for 3. Well, Michael, I'm going to give you 4. I'll skip really quickly through the 4th one. Miami is one of them, Michael. Miami went 5-7 last year. Quite simply, you're asking me, can Miami win 8 games this year? And quite simply, I'm telling you, yeah, I think they'll win 8 games this year. Improvement's going to happen. I don't think they're going to get worse. It's just a question of how much improvement. They got 2 new coordinators down there. It's the old year 1 to year 2 effect. I have not sold, I have not punted on the idea that Mario Cristobal could be a success at Miami because of the first year. Some of you have, and that is your prerogative. You've got just as much a constitutional right to have a college football opinion as me. But I disagree with you if you say that last year's disaster is indicative of the fact that they're never going to get it together. I wholeheartedly agree that it was a disaster. You're not getting steamrolled by Duke and Middle Tennessee and me not tell you it was a disaster. But they've still got Tyler Van Dyke down there. See, that's another name that I have heard a lot of folks willing to throw dirt on top of that I'm not. I don't think anybody offensively down there was put in a particularly advantageous position last year, the quarterback included. Just, can they win 8 games? We're not asking them to reinvent the wheel here. Can they win 8 games? That would be one. Miami would be one. Oklahoma, kind of similar to Miami last year. New head coach. Last year, they went 6-7. They made a bowl game, then lost the bowl game. Same as Miami. Improvement will happen. How much improvement will we see? They, over the past 2 cycles, have had top 8 portal classes and recruiting classes combined, both cycles. They lost a lot of talent when Lincoln Riley left. They have replenished with a lot of talent. They are bringing in as high a caliber of player on average as they have at any point over the last several years. And that includes the Lincoln Riley years, and that includes the Bob Stoops years. That is not the end. That's just the beginning. The end is what do you do with all of it? I use the kitchen ingredients metaphor like once per show, and so I'm putting it on probation right now, but if I were to talk about it, this is where I would use it. They got Dylan Gabriel, but I'll tell you what they have now this year, which gives me reason to believe they can win 8 or 9 games that they didn't have last year, and that is depth. Not just General Booty depth. They've got General Booty Jackson Arnold depth. And it just occurs to me that some of you are not familiar with the fact that they have a player named General Booty. So we are doing a show Meemaw would be proud of here. I did not steer it over in the gutter. The kid's name is General Booty. And if you don't believe me, Google some of the T-shirts, because no one is more custom-made for NIL merchandise opportunities than that kid. But Jackson Arnold is my favorite quarterback of this past cycle, and he's on campus too. It can't be that Oklahoma exits the Big 12 a loser. I can't see it happening, at least as bad as they were last year. This is their last year coming up in the Big 12. They were 82nd defensively in yards per play allowed. Brent Venables is not allowing that to happen again. Is he? Open-ended, because it's only March, so we can do that. I don't think so. Texas A&M, I am already kind of hitching my wagon to them this year. Not to win the title, but to make a bowl game. Let's just make a bowl game, guys. Go Aggies, make a bowl game. And I am the person who sat here and looked you in the eye around August and said they had a disaster-proof roster. Those words, in that order, came out of my mouth about Texas A&M. And then, despite the roster, they were a disaster. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I do believe they made good changes. Some of those changes, ironically enough, include some of the people on that roster not being there anymore. There is such thing as addition by subtraction. And there's also such thing as bringing in a guy that at one point looked like street pizza after he wrecked a motorcycle and was involved in a sex scandal as a head coach, coming in and doing what he's tailor-made to do, and that is to sit in an office quietly, stay out of the spotlight, and just draw up football plays. And that's Bobby Petrino, and that's the offensive coordinator, and it better work. I can joke around as much as I want to. It better work. I'm holding a pen or I'd wag my index finger at Jimbo. It better work, because if it doesn't, no buyout is high enough for those people. I know these people. I know the Texas A&M people. No buyout is high enough. They are not going to sit out there and look at this golden opportunity pass them by because you're stuck in 1987 offensively. That's not going to happen. And the fourth team, which is just, I think, like fishing with dynamite right now, it's Colorado. I heard you, again, second time I heard you yell as soon as I said something. Colorado was 1-11 last year. We're simply asking, can they win 3 or 4 games? I know the schedule is not the easiest to navigate in the world, but this was an entire team being reinvented. You get that, right? This is almost like having Xbox and hitting the reset button on a team. I always tell you it's not a video game. Dion kind of turned Colorado into a video game in the short term, and they have the number 1 portal class in the country. I don't know how else to spin it. It's not one of the. It is the number 1 portal class in the country. They have 11 players rated 4 or 5 stars that they did not have when he got there. Cormani McClain and Travis Hunter at corner will not be easy to deal with. I don't care whomst you have out there. I mean, that's a really, really good combination of players. Again, I understand there's a cohesion. There's the mortar in between the bricks that makes up a team. I'm not ignorant enough to think otherwise. That's why I'm not talking about bowl games with you. I'm talking about them winning 3 or 4 games. And 19 commits, 25 from the portal. They added like 44, if my math is correct. That's 44 players that weren't there last year, and they may not even be done. It's going to be fun. If nothing else, they may not make a bowl game. It's going to be fun to watch them try at Colorado. Everybody's got an opinion on them. I don't talk to... Think about the last time you said that, by the way. I don't talk to anyone that watches our sport that when Colorado comes up now, they don't have something to say. Some folks can't stand them. I'm not particularly sure why. I think probably you're more fed up with people talking about them, in which case you should be mad at me, not Colorado. But everyone's got an opinion on them. So Colorado's already sold over 30,000 tickets to their spring game, by the way. I don't think they've had 30,000 combined there in the history of spring football. And now all of a sudden, not only are people going to be there, they are paying to be there. Jesse, what is the average temperature in Boulder this time of year? Maybe we should go out there. I don't think you've ever been to Colorado, have you? We'll see. All right, we had a really fun question to wrap the show up here. Let me take a sip out of the chalice to prepare myself. I've gotten to experience a lot. Not everything I want to in the game quite yet, but I've gotten to experience a lot. Someone under the handle Coach Dave Doran's Burner via Twitter, not sure it's a legal name or not, hit me up and said, hey, what are your 5 bucket list college football traditions? Now, a bucket list is normally stuff you want to do that you haven't done yet. I've been able to do some of these. Some of these are still on the old bucket list. And the only rule is you just got to do them before you die. I am not scheduled to do that anytime soon. Hopefully we get to make some trips this fall. But I will tell you a couple I've already been a part of. This is my list. If you disagree with it, that's fine. You can have your own list. I don't just wear this white t-shirt because it looks good. I went to Penn State. I saw the whiteout. I want to remember it every show. Auburn was in town. It was like a Super Bowl kind of mixed with a Kiss concert, kind of mixed with WrestleMania, and everyone wearing white in the meantime. I told Jesse, because Jesse went to Penn State, and he told me, hey, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. But you know what? You experience it for yourself. This is iJosh footage that you're watching. If you're watching on your screen, that's not the ABC feed. That is. But the other shot was not. This was incredible. What an incredible night. So we went up there. And I had high expectations, and it exceeded my expectations. What stood out to me the most, and why I would always encourage you, I don't even care if you're not a fan of any of the teams playing in the game, why I would encourage you to experience the whiteout is because it's a spectacle. It takes your eyes a little while to adjust to it. And the second thing is, I've never seen another college football crowd that takes as active a role in being a participant in the event as the whiteout crowd at Penn State. Now, that's the only Penn State game I've been to, but I'm just telling you, they build it up and they build it up and they build it up, and there's some cynical people out there. I know, I'm friends with several, who look at that and they say, oh man, people make a big deal about that. It's all about blocking and tackling. It's all about execution. And yes, it is about that. I am here to humbly suggest to you that sort of environment is high level enough that it can impact your ability to do those things. I think it impacted Auburn's ability to do it that night. The whiteout record at Penn State and the performance in whiteout games by the opponent versus non-whiteout games is indisputable. And we didn't compile that list, so I'm not going to present it to you tonight. But I'm just telling you, those folks know they've got a role, they got a job to do, and those people walk in the stadium as focused as the left tackle. They just have different jobs, but everyone does it, and it's a beautiful thing. The Red River Shootout, which will be known by no other name on this program, is a game, but it's a tradition to me. Again, I grew up in rural Georgia. I thought they were overhyping it. Told the story many times now. I'm not going to go too far down the road here, but 2 years ago I went. Big noon kickoff. It's always a noon kickoff. Love the noon kickoff, 11 a.m. local time. Someone asked me the other day, is there something you've switched your opinion on in college football? There's nothing I've switched my opinion on more radically than loving noon kickoffs. I used to detest noon kickoffs because I wasn't going to the games. I didn't have to catch a flight afterwards. Now I do. I love noon kickoffs. The Cotton Bowl is where this game should always be. Noon, 11 a.m. local time, is when it should always kick off. And OU, Texas, just a perfect environment. Everything about what I experienced was perfect. Now, that was 2 years ago when it was a shootout. This past year, it was a Sarah McLachlan special, and it probably wasn't very special for Oklahoma fans to witness, those of you who stuck it out to the end. But what I got to witness a couple of years ago, I would also encourage you. Don't care if you're a fan of either team, just go, find out how right I am about it. One of the things I got to do that unless you get credentialed for the sideline, you're probably not going to be able to squeeze in, is the Cotton Bowl is a single-tiered stadium. There's just one tunnel that comes into it. It's a one-tunnel stadium. It's kind of like the Big House at Michigan, just one tunnel. And everyone uses it. Halftime hits. I march myself up that tunnel. I go out into the Texas State Fair. Funnel cake. Still had the powder on my face when the third quarter started. But I walked myself back down that ramp, right ahead of the teams, actually. I think I walked out of the tunnel with Oklahoma, taking the field for the start of the third quarter. I challenge you. Where else in life could you get such that overflow of sensory? Well, it's a sensory overload every time you go to a college football game, but you get that. Then you get to just pound sugar at halftime in the fair, no less. Then you come back in, and then you see a conclusion of one of the great rivalries in college football. Everything about it is what they say it is what I'm telling you. Let's go to Blacksburg, Virginia. I haven't been able to go. I've never been to a game at Virginia Tech. I have both of my fists clenched right now. Let's just clasp. I am pleading with Brent Pry, and I am pleading with everyone in this program. Please make this program relevant again nationally so that I can have a reason to go up there and experience Enter Sandman. It's one of the things. If I had the grease board in here right now, one of the things I would have written on the grease board is, how have I missed out on Enter Sandman? How in a world now where I get to choose the game I go to every week, how has Virginia Tech not been on the radar enough for me to be able to get up there? And when I was a youth in Georgia, Virginia Tech mattered big time. Virginia Tech was a national championship contender. And now all of a sudden, not so much. That's okay. It's cyclical. Hopefully, cyclical means we're going to get that again. It's not just a downward trajectory. Enter Sandman's incredible. That's one of those things where if you know Virginia Tech's playing a big game, it's not an option to tune in with 10 minutes to go in the first quarter, because these major broadcast networks do it right. They show you that entrance, and the production is kind of built around that Enter Sandman entrance. Man, what a spectacle that is, too, weather permitting. So that I haven't witnessed. Another pregame tradition, and I guess an in-game tradition that I have witnessed, is Sandstorm at South Carolina. Now, I've been on record as telling you I think South Carolina is the most underrated home field environment in all of college football. When you account for what the reputation is of places. Like everyone knows Neyland Stadium, everyone knows Death Valley, everyone knows those places. You know about Williams-Brice Stadium. I just never see you guys put it on your list of most intimidating environments, and I do, and I've witnessed it several times. I've been there when they played Bama. I've been there when they played Georgia. It's incredible. When they do Sandstorm, though, which I'm not going to try and replicate vocally for you, but when they do Sandstorm, not only is it loud, not only does everyone jump up and down, but there's coordination, and they chant USC, USC, and they have towels in their hand, too. I heard about that before I went up there. And again, your boy over here, just a kid from rural Georgia, I'm sitting there thinking, how magical can it be? They don't have the capacity of Sanford Stadium. They don't have the capacity of Neyland or Bryant-Denny. So it can't be any better than those places. And I'm not telling you it's better. I'm just telling you that one thing they do measures up against anything else I see in the SEC. I would also say that the Tom Petty at Florida is pretty new. They only started doing it in the last few years. I was there the first year they did that. I really like that, too. The last one, stay in the state of Florida. Chief Osceola down at Doak Campbell Stadium at Florida State, which I called Doak Walker Stadium last month, and I continue to apologize for. This, I think, if Mike Norvell is on to what I think he's on to, and he's going to get Florida State back to national prominence, this is going to be something that gets paid a lot more attention to. You see, if you're in your late teens, early 20s, you don't know Florida State. You just know it's a football program, a middling football program at that, in the SC or in the ACC for now. You don't know Florida State. You don't know Bobby Bowden's Florida State. You don't know them being one of the most feared entities in this sport. But it could be again. And when that happens, when Chief Osceola rides out and throws that flaming spear into midfield, and you actually, if you're media, you get to stand on the field. You can see him right there. On the 50, I got to see this, I think, one of the last big games Florida State played. I was there. It was Clemson and Deshaun Watson back in 2016, I believe. 15 or 16. They came in there, and Florida State had him on the ropes, and Watson did what he did in college, and they come back and they win. But I got to witness that night. Got a speeding ticket on the way home, by the way. Thomasville, Georgia. Be careful, folks. But I witnessed that night, and I remember thinking to myself, growing up a Braves fan, it was the first time I'd ever heard the Tomahawk Chop in a venue that wasn't named Turner Field or Fulton County Stadium. And the other thing about that was I remember thinking, it's a shame Florida State lost this. Like, it's a shame they can't be in the national spotlight more, because that right there would be something you tune into a game early just to be able to see. And also, the Aggie War Hymn I wanted to wrap up with. I took a lot of flack for defending Texas A&M last year. I don't know why. I certainly hope you didn't think it was going to deter me from defending Texas A&M. I just feel like I get Texas A&M. I'm not from there. I didn't graduate from there. I didn't grow up in Texas. I have a very, very firm appreciation for why they are the way they are, why they appreciate the things they appreciate, and why they act the way they act. I don't say that pejoratively. Pretty much everyone else does. That's okay. I've been out there for a few games now. The Aggie War Hymn, not quite sure what you guys are saying. I just know it's really loud. And the swaying back and forth. There's such a reputation when they do that. I think you're watching right now iJosh footage as well. There's such a reputation when they do that people who have covered games at Kyle Field and sit in the press box talk about how the entire stadium shakes. And I did believe that because enough reputable people had told me. But last game, I normally stand on the field the whole game. I ran up to the press box just so I could feel it. They were right. It feels very dangerous. I'm not an architect. They tell me that place is structurally sound. I will tell you, after it was over, I hastily got myself back down to field level because I really do feel safe down there, unless Lane Kiffin has rolled into Knoxville, Tennessee. Last time I didn't feel safe on the field. But other than that, I normally feel pretty safe. But the Aggie war hymn and the swaying back and forth when it's being played, wow, again, kind of takes your eyes a second to adjust. So anyway, those are some of the things. If you're making a college football bucket list now, those are some of the things that I would suggest you add on. Really good crowd tonight. I know there are a lot of options out there, and I know this time of year a lot of you choose to watch or listen on Friday. Truthfully, we structure this entire show to where you can listen to it or watch it at your convenience, and we appreciate you doing it whenever you do it. So for Director Colin, for Producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care, have a great start to your weekend, and God bless.